the court. We're here in Manchester. It's still very, very loud, Imogen Allison. We have to have words about this Thunderdome. But it's Manchester Thunder that's come out on top tonight against Severn Stars in round 10. I think it was, 61-46. But it was a very competitive match throughout. I'm joined here by England Rose and Manchester Thunder Midcourt Imogen Allison and Severn Stars captain Gabby Marshall, who blanked me at half-time, but we won't talk about that. Anyway, ladies, congratulations on the game tonight. I'm going to start. We've got loads of questions coming in from people at home, and we were it. But I just want to talk about the game in particular and the penalty count tonight, because it was actually almost double from Severn Stars to Thunder, and that's one of those things. Sometimes it can pay in the favour. But in your two positions at centre wing defence, where's the line between going, right, I'm going to keep hassling or I'm going to rein it in? Because we did hear a couple of warnings.
I think, well, in an ideal world, the lines before they start advancing things, and they have said to us before the games, we don't want to be doing warnings and advancements. We'll let you know if you're getting close. So at that point you kind of think, right, let me change up my tactics, let me figure it out and try something a little bit different.
I mean, it's quite hard in the circle to rein it in, but what are the choices out at centre wing defence, Gabby? Because that is a different kind of decision, right?
Yeah, I think it's just picking and choosing the ball that you play on. I think for us in our defensive structure tonight, we probably didn't have a lot of clean ball that we could run on. So yeah, it's just picking and choosing what we're letting land and then what we're shutting off the back of that. And we probably didn't quite get the balance right tonight, but I think we were there in the contest at times, and I do think that's a difficult balance to get.
All right, well, look, we're going to get into the nitty-gritty, and I put out some questions on social media. That's the only way Gabby knew she was going to be in the chat tonight. But everybody that knows me knows I love an opinion, and Imo, you're going to love this one. So I asked people on Instagram, what did they most want to hear from Imogen Allison? And the first question that came up about 1 billion times was, what position do you prefer, centre or wing defence? And you can't say, I don't care.
What an absolute classic that one is, by the way. See, the thing is, started off wing D and got more and more experience at centre, which made me kind of appreciate that I don't have to run around like a headless chicken all the time. So then I kind of moved into more centre, because really enjoy feeding the circle. I think it's class. You know, if you're doing it at wing D, then I mean that's even more fun, but that's a different story. So I'm going to firmly sit on that fence and say both.
You're killing me. Do you know?
Get those splinters out of your backside.
I can't help it, is what it is. If I'm on the court, I'm happy.
Oh, you will. And I'd like to see her on the court. Just for clarity, I think she's exceptional. I just like her in wing defence. That's it. That's all I've got to say. But let's pick up on the feeding then, because Gabby, you've also played wing defence centre. They're your two key positions. How important is that feeding role now? We saw Amy Carter with 42 feeds this evening.
Yeah, massively. I'll firmly say that I prefer playing centre than wing defence. I won't back out of that question. Even though you didn't ask me, I won't back out of it. Yeah, feeding's really important. I think, again, in this game today, we at times we got it really well, and at times we didn't find Siggy at all. And it's that touch on the ball. I think the Thunder defensive circle, they play the 2-on-1 and they drop into space really nicely. And as a feeder, you've got to sight the space. And yeah, it's something that I love doing. I love that challenge. And if we can get a long ball in, then that's even better.
Well, I can firmly say I don't like playing centre. It was the worst position ever invented. I can't defend, so I'm going to stick to wing attack. But talk to me a little bit about this thing, because you said about getting exposure at centre and the feeding being important. We saw tonight the shift in that second quarter from Thunder, using the third second, just being smarter on the ball. How much of that is sort of in you, and how much can you actually learn when you're out there? Because you've been dropped in it quite a few times internationally, and that is tough, right?
Yeah, I think experience obviously does help a lot, and like it comes naturally to some people, and I think there's only so far you can go with just a natural talent of feeding. You've got to have the experience, I think. So yeah, a little bit of both. The more you can get your hands on and feeding different shooters as well, like every shooter likes it differently. Brilliant. Yeah, and you've got to just cater to whatever they want, because
well, both of you are lucky enough to play with some key wing attacks. So in the stats tonight, we have Nat Metcalf. She's topping the leaderboard for feeds, and Jess Shaw's second. And how crucial has that partnership been for you, Gabby?
Yeah, I love playing with Jess. We've grown up playing together. We actually went to the same college, so we started playing together, England age group, and it's really nice to be playing Super League netball together over the last 2 years. And I think that connection of ours has really, really grown. And yeah, she's a fantastic wing attack. She finds the space. She puts in a lot of work in our attack end, and yeah, I love watching her do her thing. I think she's a brilliant player.
Okay, well, next question then. This is a bit of a cheap one, Imo, because it's come from Thunder Netball, and they've said, I know, what is the best thing about being at Thunder?
Honestly, what are they like? That's Taylor McKevitt, that is, by the way. Shall I just say Taylor? No, I think for me, obviously I was at Bath for a long time, so moving clubs was pretty daunting. And obviously I knew a few of the girls from England, but they were just so welcoming and so fun. Like, we work so hard, but we have so much fun, like at training and stuff. So yeah, I'm gonna say the good vibes.
I think it's really important to understand how your style fits as well. I've talked about Josie Huckle absolutely thriving in this environment. And Gabby, I know we had conversations when you left Saras, and sometimes it's the right time to go and explore other options and actually find yourself in your position. How important has Stars been for that for you?
Oh, it's been huge. I think I came off the back of bilateral ankle surgery. I probably wasn't enjoying my netball that much, and when I joined Stars, it was a complete fresh start. We had a whole new team, and Joe was really central to building that culture, and I think we just found the fun. There was quite a few of us that probably lost that love of the game a little bit, and yeah, we found the fun. As Imo said, when you're having fun and you're enjoying yourself, it makes all the hard times a lot easier. And obviously tonight we didn't get the result that we wanted, but there's no team that I'd rather be a part of than Severn Stars.
I think this is getting deep, isn't it? This is all loving. Hang on. Can I talk about Saracens right now?
Friday night.
But I think what's really, really important, and I think it's so key that people hear it from you guys, that it's not always the trajectory you want, right? It's a roller coaster ride playing elite netball. Injuries, illnesses, selection, deselection. It's not always the cream of the crop that you see at the end. I've got a question in here to say, what piece of advice would you give to a young, aspiring centre stroke wing defence, Imo?
For me, I think just have fun, like as we've said before, but like when I started playing, I only started playing because my friends were playing, to be honest. Like they just brought me along, and I think if you're enjoying yourself and finding the club that like you thrive in, I think that's hugely important, and you'll grow so much better and so much quicker.
This is a serious one for you, Gabby. What do you eat before the game? I mean, I know what she eats after the game because she just offered me a Percy pig. I declined. They're not my type, but what do you like?
I kind of mix it up, to be honest. I generally have porridge in the morning of a game day, and then, yeah, I'm not that fussy. I used to be quite superstitious when I was younger, but I've been around the block a long time now, so I just, whatever I fancy on a game day.
Not your classic pancakes. I know you're so good at your pancakes now.
Yeah, I used to have pre-game pancakes all the time back in the day, but I kind of just mix it up now. I'm getting old, so just whatever floats the boat, really.
Brilliant, thank you for that. I do like a pancake too. Well, listen, after the wing defence centre question, which I think was a big stitch-up from my lot, the second most important question was, and Emma, I hate to ask you this, do you want to go and play out in Australia? And it's SSN on the cards. And I feel a little bit like I don't want to lose you.
Lose you out of me?
For me, I would love to play anywhere. Like, I'm all about experiencing everything possible. I'd love to play in Australia, but right now for me, I'm loving the environment that I'm in, and I'm growing as a player. And obviously with the coaches that I've got, like Karen and Malks and Gabs, they're incredible. So for me right now, this was the best move to keep going with where I want to be. But yeah, definitely not off the cards at all.
Do you guys keep in touch with anybody out there? I know you're all friends with Fran.
Oh, that bloody Fran Williams.
Oh, God, that girl.
She doesn't stop talking to you, just talk to me. She talks to me all
now
the
I'm
time.
a bit offended, actually. She doesn't talk to me that much. I hope you're watching this, Fran. Reply to my text.
And on that note, I'm going to let these two go and cool down properly. Fran Williams, if you are listening, you need to get in touch with Gabby. She's very upset. But listen, you guys have been fantastic. This is what Off the Court's all about. Make sure you tune in this week. We spoke to Sara Francis-Bayman, who is also loving life down under Omar. I'll say you're after new experiences. I'll give you a little tap up. But listen, you guys have been brilliant. Good luck next week. Go and cool down, and well done. Thank you. Welcome to this week's Off the Court, and I'm very excited to announce that this week we have Sara Francis-Bayman on the line. We've got another Aussie. Well, she's a part-time Aussie, kind of. Assistant coach at West Coast Fever and very good friend. And someone I love having netball chats with. So welcome,
Thank you.
Sara.
I am offended that you called me Australian, but we'll let it slide as I'm over here.
Well, you're not blonde enough yet. When we spoke to Tracy Nev last week, she's gone very, very blonde, but she's still not got the twang. You certainly haven't. And please don't start doing that to us.
No, you'll have to tell me if it happens.
You are glowing though. I hear it's very hot in
Perth
Perth
is
at the moment.
beautiful. Like we had a 30-degree day today for autumn, so can't complain.
How's that northern skin coping with that?
Like summer was a struggle. We had to invest in some sun shelters and gallons of factor 50, but we've made it through.
You've made it through. Well, listen, it's great to have you here. We've often chatted about this. We've obviously known each other for a very long time. We've often chatted, well, will we do our own podcast one day? But we reckon we'd be banned after the first episode, so we'd have to record 10 in a row. So I'm going to try and keep it as easygoing as possible today.
PG.
You okay with that?
Yeah, let's go.
PG, perfect. Well, let's talk about that role then. So, assistant coach in SSM, West Coast Fever, one of the biggest teams in the league, assisting with Dan Ryan. Talk to me a little bit about how that role came about and what you're actually up to.
Yeah, how it came about, I was at Fever doing some coaching in their academy and talent coach, and then had a couple of chats with Dan. I obviously know him from a long time ago, from him coaching me at Thunder. And yeah, it just seemed like a good fit. Ned was going back home to Sydney, and so she wasn't going to be assistant coaching again. And I was excited by the opportunity. I think at the time it wasn't clear who we'd have in our roster. That's probably similar for most teams. But I think, like you say, Fever have kind of built themselves as one of the top teams in SSN over the last 6-7 years, between Stacey Marinkovic and now Dan Ryan's reign. So I think it was always going to be an exciting prospect to get in with one of the big SSN teams and just go, yeah, let's see what's popping off here. Let's see what we can add.
Can you talk to me about the relationship with Dan then? Because I know we've worked together, and that kind of mix of head coach, assistant coach is so crucial. We heard Tracy Nev talking about her relationship with Nicole Richardson and like how it all kind of mashes. Now, I would say, knowing you very well and knowing Dan as I do, that you're kind of different in probably a glass half full, glass half empty kind of way. And how important are those relationships, and how have you managed to make that mix work?
Yeah, well, I think working with Dan is very different to working with you. We have colour-coded spots and everything is, very precise and measured. But I think as an assistant coach, you've got to work out how you complement a coach and what you bring. So what they need from you. And sometimes they know what they need and sometimes they don't. But I think for that assistant role, it's important that you go and mould yourself to the environment and to the kind of situation you're in, rather than as a head coach, you're kind of more able to kind of go in and steamroll and do whatever you want. Whereas as an assistant, what I've found is, Dan is very... he lives in extremes, so he's either like fun and leery and an idiot, or he's like very like intense, serious. Let's go for like in sessions it's like intensity, purpose, all the rest of it. Whereas I'm much more kind of just laid back the whole time. So I think when he is in that serious mode, it's about me kind of complementing that with a bit of a laid back edge and lightening scenarios sometimes, versus when he's been like Disco Dan, then it's a little bit different. And it's nice for players to see both sides of coaches. Dan likes to theme his seasons, so there's always been like a lot on social media around the kind of seance circle that Fever had in 2022 and what was going on there, and this season as well, the culture and off-court stuff is based around a theme, and like for me that's something very new and something very different and not at all how I would do it, but that doesn't mean I don't see value in it, and it doesn't mean like I can't enjoy it, kind of rip it a little bit at times, but just kind of I don't know, get involved with it to an extent where it's meaningful for everyone. So it's different, but it's good. It's what I'm here for, to kind of learn new things and different ways of doing things.
Firstly, before I get into that, did you have a nickname for me? If Disco Dan is there, because Disco Dan's all I know. I've never worked with him as a coach. So I've never seen the serious side. But did you have a nickname for me?
Not one I'd say to your face, no.
And that's why we work so well together. I love that bit though about sort of the culture and how that complements each other, and sort of talking about that running theme. I think the players have to totally buy into that as well, don't they? Because they see the head coach as very much that person, that forefront and centre. And like you say, they can be two different people at times, because what you need on the court and what you need in sessions can be completely different things. That kind of laid back approach from you, working now with sort of a different mix and working with the different people you have. Is there bits that you would take now into your game going back if you went into as a head coaching role?
Yeah, definitely. I think the ability to drive intensity here is kind of off the charts, and I think that has been a learning curve for me, because you kind of you don't know what you don't know, and so I think I am probably quite tactical in my thinking, and I think the skill based, how much of training is skill based here was a little bit not a shock, because you know that that's kind of the Australian way, but I think the intensity that they do it at means that it's different from a skill session at home, where you haven't driven intensity and you've not got it out of players, versus here where everything is done so well and so hard that you're kind of able to get stuff out of more basic drills and practices. Whereas, I think I spent the first year of my coaching trying to make up the world's greatest practice, and just failing every week. So, probably, trusting my ability to drive intensity more, having seen how well it's done here.
Well, let's talk a bit more about that coaching then, because you're in charge of the defence end. That's sort of your more speciality. Is that, yeah? So, I know when we spoke to Fran Williams, she did our first off the court.
What did she say?
This season, and she talked about that first conversation. The good things. But she talked about that first conversation with Dan, and she said, the defence end had a gold, a silver, and a bronze World Cup medalist in there. And when we spoke to Tracy Nev, she was talking very much about when she designed her roster, it was very much about the way she wanted to play and that Australian style. You perhaps don't have that luxury. You've got Sunday in there, but you've got Katie Ann, you've got Fran, so you've got Jamaican, Australia, English. How are you blending that mix together? And does that fill you with more almost excitement that you've got differences to work with rather than the same?
Yeah, and I think when we put this roster together, I think that was the excitement, that we can play in different ways now. We can play a hard one-on-one game and it be, your traditional Australian style, but we've got so much variety in there, and not just through the internationals, but the ability and the skill set that Sunday's got as well, that actually we feel like we can be more than a one-dimensional team. We can throw different combinations out there. We can throw different styles out there. And at times, I think that's overwhelming for a coach, because you're like, where do I start, and how do I get to this like amazing end point where everyone knows what they're doing all the time, and we're able to change things at the drop of a hat. And realistically, we're not there. But that is kind of the goal by the end of the season and the pointy end of the season, that we've got 4, 5, 6 different options in defence, and we've got a bunch of players who are fully understanding of their role in that and fully on board with what we're trying to do defensively.
I love how you say we're not there yet, and yet your first game against Giants was an 84-65 win. So it's a pretty scary thought process that this team's only going to get better. But look, I want to shift attention then to the international game, because this year, if you follow anybody on social media that's anything to do with England netball, then you'll have seen it was 6 years since England won that historic gold medal at the Commonwealth Games, and you were commentating on it. I've never heard you so excited.
I've never been so
Sara.
excited. I'm usually like pretty miserable. So that was it was an unreal day, and I actually think a really important one for international netball. Like looking back now at where we are in the international game, I think without that gold, you probably wouldn't have the competition we do now.
I mean, it's closer than ever, isn't it, at the top? 5 or 6 teams competing, which, is unheard of. In our day, when we first started, Australia and New Zealand were it. We were in the first teams that beat them, but I mean, it was never consistently. So to do a major comp was huge. To back that up, then last year getting the World Cup silver. It's so close at the top, and there's so much pressure on the coaches and the teams than ever before. And we've had loads of conversations about this because, we've watched Australia in the big competitions sort of get beaten for the first time and then come round and back up the medal. What do you think, though, is the major point at the minute that is getting teams across the line, across each other? Because it is so close, and we're talking about minuscule things. Like, what is that turning point? What's going to be where teams can actually consistently go out and beat each other?
I'm not sure with the level that it's at the minute that you're going to what Australia have done in the past few years. I think is probably more impressive than what they did for that 20 years of dominance that they had. Because for me, the teams are so tight. It should be almost impossible to get a consistent winner, like to consistently win and win again. Because I think one of the big shifts in international netball is how hard it is to win ball now. So defensively, you're not seeing games where you've got 30 gains from a team. Like it's really difficult to get ball off teams. So I think what we've seen from the top teams is an evolution of how they try and win ball, and a lot of it's a full court defensive effort. Some of it is Australia going away from a hard man-on-man job to throwing in boxes in there and zones and off marking. And I think that the ability to adapt is probably the main thing that's deciding games at the minute. So, you can scout a team till high heaven, and then they come out and they do something slightly different. And then what? Like, what have you got in your locker to change that? And you can do it through personnel. And we've seen that from England, we've seen that from Australia, and you can do it through tactics. And I think what's really difficult for coaches now is having enough time with teams and having every player understand various tactics, because you can't just go out and be like a one-trick pony anymore. You can't be New Zealand, where you go out and you zone and you zone and you zone, because people know you're going to zone, and then they put something out against it. You've got to have options. And I think the teams that adapt, and you saw that from Australia in the Common Games and the World Cup, from the rounds to the final, they came at England with something different, and Jamaica, and it's tough to do that.
Yeah, it's quite interesting actually, because we chatted a lot about this at Netball World Cup, because when you're playing in a league, when you're playing club netball, you have far more sessions together. You are literally have a week between games, so you have time to come in, reflect, change again, put your tactics in for the next game, XYZ, so you carry on. When you're at Netball World Cup, you are literally playing back to back. I think when we did Scotland, we had 5 games in a row, and that varied between African styles to Caribbean styles to European styles. So you are literally just jumping from one thing to another, and everyone plays very differently. So that adapting is really, really important. In terms of getting that out of players, then, is that personnel change? Because what we've seen at England a lot is loads of changes. Like, we just put a different person on to try and do that job. Or can it come from the same person? And what does that look like at training?
It can come from the same person, definitely. And I think that, like, to me, that's the beauty and the challenge in coaching. Like, how do I get a player through a rough quarter? Like, how do I get them going out the next quarter believing that they're going to get a different result by making some changes? But, working a lot with Sue Gordian, like, her whole thing is like skill is king. So like skill is king always. Like if a player is highly skilled, then they're going to be able to change. You're going to be able to ask them to change something, and they'll be able to do it because they have the skill set. Where it falls down is, and I think for your lower nations, if you don't have the skill set, then you're limited to what can be asked of you. How you play in attack, whether you can deliver long ball to corners, whether you can, have a shooter exiting versus standing and holding. You've got to have such a well-rounded skill set in order to change game plan with the same players, that not a lot of teams can do it.
Yeah, it's quite interesting, isn't it? Because when we were working at Scotland, we absolutely loved that role, but it was a different role, having come from an England system that was far more advanced in lots of different ways, and that was due to all kinds of things. We talk about finances. It was so much better at England than it is for a lot of the lower nations, and still not where it needs to be. And pathways, the finances, the venues, all the other things that we were working against when we were in Scotland. And it was a real fine balance between upskilling the player, but putting enough structure in there as well that they could play at that level. Structure for me is kind of, and we've had these chats before, has started to change the game completely, because it's become great in terms of that it gives possession netball and it gives a way of playing. But do you think it started to almost dumb down the excitement of the game?
I think to an extent it has, because I think teams have become so risk averse sometimes that like I miss Temma Power George just banging ball in from halfway and things like that, and seeing a pass given a pass, and Navalinos and some really smart players. But I also think we do a disservice to this current crop of players by thinking that they can't do that. They definitely can, and I think you see it, but you just see less of it because teams are so much more disciplined these days. And part of that is the structure and trying to stick to what they're doing. If you want to get to circle edge all the time for your feeds, then teams are being really disciplined with that versus giving long ball. But I think the very top teams, you still have an element of flair, and I think that is the kind of ultimate goal for a coach, that you give enough structure, but also you give your players enough they have enough skills and they have enough game sense and decision making ability to know when to break that structure and to do what they give what you see, like for a defender to come out of structure and go for a ball, or an attacker to give something that isn't the safest pass in the world, because that also is what lifts teams, and that's what sport's about. We are still in an entertainment business, so I think it can get boring, but I think we've almost got through that wave of it being boring, and we're kind of coming out the other side of it, I think.
I think a lot of that comes down to the coaching and giving the players not the fear almost. And I mean, you played like that. Jesus, if we ever needed a ball, Sara would definitely come out of structure and have a crack at it. And if you ever wanted to put in a long bomb, you would certainly send it. But that becomes really important. I want to talk a bit more about the international game then, because we're so focused on what's happening at top end. But we both know there's still major issues that's going down at the bottom end. Firstly, do you think it's important that the international game builds more than 6 teams competing?
Yeah. Because it's not really an international game, is it? Otherwise, it's just 6 teams playing a tournament all the time. And what's the point of having a World Cup or a Commonwealth Games if it's the same competition as a 6-team, Nations Cup or whatever you want to call it? So I think for the good of the sport, you need more than 6 teams. The more the better, and there's always going to be challenges with that. But I think what some of the teams who've risen the rankings, the likes of Uganda, have been able to achieve should give a real boost to some of those lower nations that actually, they're doing it on half a shoestring, So you've got the talent there, you've got the players there. Like, how can you get them the coaching and the the support that they need.
Is there scope for better competition then for the lower nations, like how we help with that, and also how we help coach development? We've seen loads of it in England, right? That Australian coaches have come over here. We've seen all our players that have wanted to go out overseas to expand their game, to get better. And you're seeing it that the top African players, top Caribbean players are being brought into the top leagues and are making careers out of it, which is absolutely brilliant. But we've still got that same problem. There's something we've found with Scotland is that, you know, you can take everyone out, but it's got to still coexist as it goes back. And that whole sort of coach development piece, that whole competition piece, surely has got to be the answer if we really want to excel internationally as a whole.
I mean, there's got to be better competition for that, you know, probably number 6 to number 12 or 14. They need more competition, they need better competition, they need consistent competition, and they need opportunities to play the top teams. You know, playing an England or an Australia or Jamaica once every 4 years is not particularly helpful. Like, and it doesn't have to be the same team all the time, but they need opportunities to play. And like you say, the coaching and the infrastructure of that is a massive job, but it's got to start with the top nations. You know, the SSN teams don't take African and Caribbean players as goodwill. They're doing it because they're the best players. You know, there's nothing altruistic about it. They're doing it when they are kind of the finished article and they're good to go. But there's hundreds of players in these countries that are fantastic players and have got loads of talent, but they need the coaching. And you see, you know, it's kind of it's always kind of happened to an extent, and I think you see it a little bit more now with, you know, Australian and New Zealand coaches going to Pacific Islands, and I think England needs to do more. You need to send your coaches to the home nations, to the European nations. Like, if coaches haven't got a pathway in England to get to international coaching, there's pathways elsewhere where they can go there, coach, and upskill the coaches there as well. You know, we went to Scotland and had a great time and tried to get everyone on the bandwagon, like, come and watch sessions, come and be part of it. And the same for, you know, the likes of South Africa with the African nations. You've got to be willing to share knowledge to an extent with the lower nations, to get that ball rolling. You know, I'm not advocating for Australian coaches to go to England and, you know, Stacey Marinkovic to go and tell us a game plan. Like, that's not it. But, you know, Australian coaches going to the Cook Islands or Fiji is not the same thing. Like, you've got to help.
Yeah, I think we were quite vocal about that as Scotland, weren't we? Because, again, as a nation, they're fantastic. Their set-up governing body, what they were doing, forward thinking, it was absolutely brilliant to work with. But there were just so many barriers, and I think that was frustrating, and not from their side. And you know, I was quite vocal about it. You know, that as England, we could certainly help more. We could certainly help the home nations more. I think as the league looks to turn professional, that's going to be key as well. One of the things we talked about Scotland was actually trying to push the athletes to get out there and go and experience other teams and get down into England sort of sides. And yet, you know, when that started happening with England were trying to hold on to them. We've seen New Zealand trying to hold on to their players. So it's quite funny, that sort of forward thinking. But I mean, now being out in SSN, just how important has it been to get those different experiences of exposure? You've played out in New Zealand, you're now coaching out in Australia. Like, you've talked about the learnings as a coach. Just how important is that for all players at the moment?
Yeah, you can't buy it, because you can have different experiences, you know, within one country, but the perspective somewhere else is always going to be different. And I think, you know, now I think New Zealand will have to rejoin with Australia to some extent, whether it's allowing players to come here or it's rejoining the league, because they did a really good job of staying insular and succeeding for a short period of time. But it's only ever going to be a short period of time, because you're on a global stage internationally, so you've got to compete globally, and you've got to get out there and learn and understand what's happening. So I think, it's a fantastic experience for players and for coaches, and it's not around stealing information necessarily either way. It's just about creating better players, creating better coaches, creating a better game. Like the international game needs to excite fans in order to survive. Otherwise, why would people watch? And that, like, for me, some of, there was fantastic games at World Cup, but those teams only get talked about every 4 years. So you've got to get people excited about international netball. That's not the top 4 or 5 teams.
It's something we tried to do at Scotland, wasn't it? Like we were trying to. We went into a World Cup very different to how we went into England World Cups. England World Cups we were looking to medal. We always wanted the shiny gold. It never quite happened, but it was about medaling, and we talked a lot about this culturally heading into the World Cup with Scotland, because we knew we weren't going to win, right? And the players knew we weren't going to win, but there were also there were still targets, there were still goals, there were still expectations, and we went eggs all in one basket really to beat Malawi, and we did, and we tactically built and planned around that, and we got very, very close. And we talked about how different that journey would have been if we'd had won that first game, and what that would have looked like. In terms of culturally and shifting, like, do you think, looking back at it again, if we could revisit that, is that the way forward, or is it about building this sort of better platform where you're just kind of competing and challenging, or is it really about targeting teams, going at teams, and trying to keep that excitement in the game?
It's all about what you're working with. At Scotland, we couldn't build a better platform because you don't have the number of players you need. So one of the reasons England and Australia are strong is because you've got thousands and thousands of players that want to play for those countries. If you've not got the player base, you have to work very hard with the players that you have, and you have to target players to get them through the pathways into international level. And I think you should never accept mediocrity, and that is not around thinking Scotland are going to win, but for them, the highest kind of compliment we could pay them was going, we think we can beat Malawi, let's go and take them on. And I would do that every day of the week, because otherwise, what is the point? Like, I don't want to play sport to be like, oh, this time we lost by less than last time. I don't. If I lose, I lose, but at least dare greatly in those scenarios, and that's where you get some of your fairy tales. And I think that's a bit of a different scenario to a Uganda who have been building for a few years, and at some point they're going to knock off one of those big teams, and it is going to be huge. There will be shockwaves through the netball. Well, it's not even shockwaves, but there'll be ripples through the netball world. Everyone knows it's coming, and at some point it'll happen. And they've done a great job of building that over years. Like you said, like for other teams, Scotland, probably a lot of your Pacific teams, your Fijis and your Caribbean teams, you don't get much consistency in terms of time with them, or players playing elsewhere and coming back and making a massive difference to that team. So actually put a strategy together that you feel like you can take down a team that's above you and go hell for leather. Like, why wouldn't you?
And that's why we had a lot of fun. I think still my favourite quote, and I have to keep it PG, but my favourite quote was when you spoke to the group and you went, if you're going to be, you might as well be really, really, And when they gave us our leading card, that was one of the quotes on there, quoted by Sara Francis-Bayman. And I get it. It was very much throw it all in. I'm still for the entertainment of the game. I still think it's so important, which is why I'm so passionate about, how do we win more ball? How do we keep the flair in the game whilst keeping the possession netball? And how do we keep building a bigger fan base across the board that isn't just reliant on one or two nations succeeding?
Especially for the lower ranked teams. If I'm not going to play an attractive style of netball where I go after people, what's going to make anyone watch? Nothing. Like, no one cares who's ranked, 8th to 16th, really. So give them something to get excited about, give them something to watch, be, be creative, be bold. Like it's almost a free hit at teams. So you've got to take that opportunity.
Well, listen, we've come to the end of our little chat. I want to ask you. I asked Lisa Alexander the same question. There, you've coached age group, you've coached internationally, you now coach in SSN, you coached Loughborough, was really successful with them. If there's any team in the world right now you could take on, who would it be?
Well, I think what I learned coaching age group is that I swear too much to coach age groups. Everyone's eyes are just like wide looking at me like, who is this woman? But I did really enjoy it. That was a good learning curve too. I think for me at the minute, probably South Africa would be the most exciting team to coach in the world. They've got hugely talented youngsters coming through. I mean, I don't know what they're feeding them in South Africa, but there are some giant players coming through in all senses of the word. And they're at the start of a new cycle. The expectations aren't too high. You've got time to work with them, and you've probably got time to shape a program in South Africa that you can make it look how it needs to look in order to be successful. So I think that's probably one of the most exciting jobs in world netball at the minute.
And let's be honest, who wouldn't want to live in Cape Town?
Yeah, I mean, I'm less keen for Pretoria, but if you're gonna go Cape Town, happy days. Who did Lisa Alexander say?
Then we're all in. Well, if she's gone rogue, she's going into rugby league.
No.
No, you don't. AFL, you could do a bit of AFL.
There's too many people. I struggle with like 10 or 12. I don't want like a squad of 40. So.
No, heaven forbid. Imagine the culture there, Saras. Imagine the theme you'd have to have for that team.
A lot of come by ours.
Well, listen, it's been mega speaking to you. I love picking your brains about anything netball. Loving what you're doing at West Coast Fever. So proud as well that you're flying that flag. As an English person out in Australia, I mean, it's no mean feat. I've said the same to Tracy. Like, it's pretty impressive that we've got you guys out there pushing the game forward. Of course, make sure you come back and give us all the secrets. Also, make sure you send us some of their players back as well. Like, I'd quite like Fran back at some point when you're done with
she's
that.
Loving the beach too much at the minute.
But other than that, yeah, I've seen. I'm not sure I can pull her back into the cold sports halls in England, but we'll see what happens. So, Saras, when we work together, culture's always my thing. But I've never been so out there to have a theme and have so much props going with it. So can you tell me a little bit about the Emerald City, because I am absolutely intrigued.
Yeah, I mean the theme is strong. There's no misunderstanding of the theme, and props are key to the theme. So if you need an Emerald City buy-in or building, then Dan is your man. And if you are struggling to source ruby slippers at any point in your life, then Dan Ryan can find them. Who knows where, but they are around, and they are being enjoyed. By Olivia Wilkinson at the minute, I think. So yeah.
Well, if you ever get them, if you're ever lucky enough to get them, make sure you click them 3 times and you can come
They'll
home.
be all over my social media if I got them. I'd be like just walking around in them day to night.
I cannot wait. Vintage shirts on top, ruby slippers on bottom.
What dreams
are
made of?
Note, Sara. Thank you very much. What dreams are made of.